Perfect. Good morning. We want to welcome everyone that is with us, both in person here and also virtually as well. This is the Cincinnati School Board's committee regarding money and a bunch of other stuff, the Budget, Finance, and Growth Committee. I am Eve Bolton and proud to be a chair of this committee. And we have a full agenda today, but before we start our agenda, we'll start down there and we'll go around the horn and introduce ourselves as to who we are and what we do. Get it, Kev.
Kevin Ashley, Director of Financial Reporting and Transparency in the Treasurer's Office.
Jennifer Wagner, Treasurer.
Mike Morosky, Board Member.
Brandon Craig, Board Member.
Greenwood, I, Manager of State and Federal Grants.
Phyllis Davis, the Board Administrative Assistant.
Joseph Porter, Accounting Operations Manager, Treasurer.
Thank you very much. We'll get started right away if we're ready. We'll start, as we do almost every month, the monthly financial reports. Treasurer Wagner, introduce our presenter. And
Actually, we have three, as usual. So we'll start with Kevin and then go to State and Federal Reportment with Taya, and then Joseph, are you going to talk about the CRAs? Yep. Okay.
Awesome. All right, well, it's good to be here with you. Oh, sorry, I didn't even think about that. That's important, right?
Good to have you here.
Thank you. Sorry, the printed version I brought you is the smaller version, but obviously we'll go through it, go through some of the graphs here, and if you have any questions, obviously we'll talk about those. So the first slide just kind of gives a quick overview of for the month, and I'll kind of hit on these as we go through each of the graphs. Yeah. So Rob, if you'll go to slide number 4. So this graph represents green is the cash balance at the end of July for the last 3 years. So on the right side is the most recent July and going back, and then the blue represents the outstanding encumbrances at that time. So just to point out, you'll notice last year's, this is just general fund balance was 256. This year was 227. A couple reasons for that. One is to cover grant amounts that we were waiting on reimbursements. We had to advance additional funds to the ESSER fund, for instance. And so the effect of that was to bring the general fund balance down at the end of the year. Those will be returned, and particularly as we start receiving those from the state, that will make the general fund whole on those advance amounts. Also, the beginning cash balance for the fiscal year was down a little bit. And again, it was mainly related to that. The other thing I did want to point out, the property tax advances. So starting in July, we request the county to provide any property tax money that they have already received so that we have that in our coffers and not in theirs until the settlement comes around. So the timing of that, last year in July, we received about 150, and this year in July we only got about 132 million. And part of that, right,
big difference.
Part of that again is really timing. We're still waiting for August. They may actually wait and do everything with the settlement. So depending on the timing of the settlement, we may get another advance, or they may hold off and just do it all together. But those are the two factors that led to that difference. The next slide is just looking at revenue. Again, the blue bars are the 3 most recent years, and green is the budget for this year. So another thing I like to point out here is at the top where it says 25.7%, we've already received 25% of our revenues this year. And that's because we got most of our fall settlement already through those tax advances. So we see a big influx in July, and then we'll see another big influx in January.
If I could ask, just if anybody's viewing this, how often do we receive those payments?
We usually get one or two prior to the actual settlement.
Okay,
So what they call the August settlement and the February settlement.
all right.
Usually a month in advance of that, we get one or two payments. And then we even get advance on our bond levy as well. So that money goes in fund two as soon as we receive it.
Thank you.
The other thing, the 6.6 million, again, as things, we're still looking back 3 years. At that time, we had the tuition deductions, the pass-through funding, where we received money for the community school students, and then it was deducted back out, so we never really saw the money. So we're just trying to capture that difference, and for 1 month, it was only about $6 million at that time, but as the year goes by, you'll see that number grow. Next slide. So this is revenue by source. Again, you can see the blue. So last year, 149 million versus 132. Again, about that 15, 17 million related to taxes. The green is the state foundation. And if you'll recall, last year in July, we were receiving our funding based on the prior year. It was as the new budget was being approved. And so some of the timing is going to be different. Just on a raw July to July, we received about 2 million more. But I think Jen's going to talk a little bit about state funding and how overall, once, as we look at the annual numbers, it will be a little bit different. Next slide is expenditures. Again, we have just the 1 month, July. The light blue is the actual expenditures. So from last year to this year, 21.2 versus 24.9. Another thing to keep in mind, we had temporary appropriations last year.
Mhm.
This year we hit the ground with permanent appropriations.
Yes, for the benefit of the public, we are so happy to celebrate that because how many, was it at least 2 years or?
2 years we did temporary appropriations. One because we were in the midst of COVID, and last year was because we were still trying to recover financially, and we had ESSER and we were trying to figure all that out. So last year we ended up having up to 9 amendments on agreements, which was really challenging to manage through. So I'm very pleased that we were able to get a full annual appropriation this year.
Well, thank you and thank the board. That's great.
And the other amount represents the encumbrances for all of the contracts that have been approved and put in place for general. Okay, next slide. This is something we kind of did last year to determine the unallocated budget. So in other words, the green represents what's been appropriated for salary and benefits. That has not been spent, obviously, at this point. And then again, repeating the encumbrances that are already allocated, and the actual expenditures leaves about 12% that at this early stage in the year has not been encumbered or set aside.
Is that a normal kind of percentage or lower or higher?
I look back at last year, and I think at the end of August, it was about 18%. I don't think we did the calculation in July, so I think that seems to be ahead of where that was last year.
Okay.
Next slide. So school-wide pool, just want to talk a little bit about that, just as a reminder and just to lay the groundwork for how that's going to be different this year. In the past, we have used a school-wide pool program, which was approved through the state, where approximately 92% of the fund was general fund, and about 8%, round numbers here, was Title I. And once that money was pulled in the Fund 598, then that was used to support those schools that were identified. I think there was 20 some schools. I'm not sure of that number, but
What, 12 for 8, 15? It changes every year, but Yeah, the majority of our schools are Title I eligible.
Mhm.
So Title I eligible schools participated in the pool. It allows us to commingle general fund with federal funds to serve students. But we elected this year not to participate in the school-wide pool because of our equity policy and our attempt to clearly define equitable distribution of funds through the use of federal funds.
And personally, professionally, I thank you, because I've hated the school-wide
Yes, I
pool.
know.
But always been overruled, and rightfully so, by the experts.
Well, and Kevin's getting ready to explain to you the reason why there's still money being charged to the school-wide pool fund is because we're still paying out last year's salaries at level pay.
Right.
And so, and last year's encumbrances, so as soon as that clears out,
Great.
we won't be using the fund anymore.
All the FY23 contract amounts will come either from general fund or title. So next slide. Again, this is showing that carryover each year. July really just represented paying out previous contracts and then any purchase orders. At this point, we've appropriated $30 million. We think that'll be sufficient to pay out those contracts and other encumbrances. Next slide, 2 slides. Preschool expansion, this is just showing their financial activity for July, that middle column. Again, tax advances we received, and those were allocated. The portion of that levy that represents preschool was allocated. We have not done United Way payments at this point, and tuition assistance, there were no students utilizing tuition assistance at this point. So now, starting in August, we'll have calculations for that as well.
The United Way payment, the first payment's due September 1st, and you've already approved that in the last treasurer's report. So
Yes, that was just
payment
Monday
won't show
night
up
or
until
something.
September
Yeah.
results.
The other thing I wanted to point out here, and it's another conversation I know we've had, but in the budget column for FY23, the revenues of $15.8 million is fairly consistent from the levy. There's obviously an increase for United Way and an increase for tuition assistance estimates based on a projection of additional students. Results in $19.4 million. And so just to point out, obviously, the difference is going to be made up by those prior year underspends are now going to be used significantly in this year and the next year or two. And I know we've had that conversation, but I just wanted to make sure that everyone is aware of it.
Any preschool questions? Again, I just consider that to be difficult as we go into that reserve and how many years or we'll be able to keep going into a reserve.
Right, so the preliminary estimate indicates fiscal year 25 is when that reserve will be chewed up, depending on if we match our forecast. The CPP Finance Committee that I'm a member of, we are going to be reviewing that at our September meeting or the next meeting, and then we'll bring it back to this committee with an update in how that will play out.
Shouldn't that kind of impact or at least influence the negotiations to create the new agreement?
It's a possibility that we'll put language in there. I need to get an update on where we stand with that, but yes, the two groups we've agreed to work on it together to go forward.
Okay.
Mhm.
And maybe not be adding more things to spend the dollars on if we're already going to be hitting the reserve in fiscal 25.
Right. This
And
is
I
a
know there's
result
been
of
a
the-
request to indeed expand some of the stuff regarding the 2 stars and what have you. But
Right. This is a result of the increased number of students enrolled and the increase in the rate of tuition that increases 3% per year to keep up with cost of living.
so that's something to be looking at
Mhm.
even in fiscal 24
Yes.
for next year's budget.
Yes.
Thank you.
If you recall, that levy will come up for renewal in 25.
Uh-huh.
All right, the next slide. So the next section, jump around a little on the agenda if you don't
It's okay,
mind.
please.
This
If it
is,
expedites it, that's great.
that'll be, I think it's number 3 on there.
Yes.
Yes.
The annual investment update, we just included it in this PowerPoint to make it easier.
Let me remind the board members too that we already saw this in the treasurer's report.
You saw the commercial paper investments,
Okay,
but
but
there's
not,
others, and that's what Kevin's going to explain.
great, thank you.
So one of the things we wanted to do here was to present our interest revenue investment income based on sales and maturities and all of that. So this is what's actually recorded to our accounting system. There are going to be some timing issues. Obviously, the length of maturity for some of our investments drives how much our income may be. But you'll see the general fund column going back 5 years, we were at 1.4 million. We had a couple really good years of investment. Now we've had a couple of years
As
since
did America.
COVID that haven't been quite as positive, but we have been in touch with Red Tree, who handles a significant portion of our investments. And just a couple things they've mentioned to us is that the market has moved tremendously year to date. So this is positive going forward. She said more so than we've seen since 1994. Treasury rates have increased significantly from last July to this July. So for reference, the 2-year Treasury has increased from 0.23% to approximately 3%, which I believe she said was like a 15,000% increase. I mean, it's pretty big calculation there. So one of the things she mentioned was, providing some patience and understanding as the portfolio catches up. So as there was quite a bit of things that mature between now and September, and as those mature, then they'll be able to reinvest those at a higher rate.
Okay.
So the debt service column is, we're required in some of our debt to make payments to a bank account. They call it a sinking fund, so that when the maturity comes due, the entire amount will be available to pay the debt. It's not like we pay it with our other debt on a regular basis. So what we do is we put that money in that sinking account and then we invest it. So we're earning $600,000-$700,000 a year on that.
If I could, I know we're not going to be talking today necessarily about the presentation regarding the levy as it was initially scheduled, but it would be good to involve and include our pay down of debts as part of the levy presentation, because I know that Greater Cincinnati per capita has more savings and loan than any other place on the universe. So please include that, because I think it's a good record.
Yep.
On the pay down.
Yeah, we're over halfway paid out on our FMP debt.
That's wonderful.
And as you know, we've had opportunities to refinance,
Yes.
Which has also been some cost savings. So as the interests kind of go the other way, we may not have those same opportunities, but
Gotcha. It'll be good to the other column, so to speak.
It'll help the investment income side.
Okay.
Next slide, please. So again, this is a 5-year Treasury, but I found this illustration to show really where rates have moved on that one. The gray column was identified as a recession period. So again, just kind of a representation of that. The next slide is, we wanted to give you just a summary of the bank reconciliation. And so one of the reasons I kind of wanted to highlight, a couple things I wanted to highlight here, where it says U.S. Bank Red Tree managed, about the 5th line down. So that is portfolio for us, which is made up of commercial paper, government securities, a lot of different things go into that. The next section, the 31 million or the 13%, is what Jen was referencing relating to the sinking funds. So at the end of June, we had about $31 million in those accounts, which will be used to make those future payments. The other things are just our general operating, and then we have bank reconciliation items at the bottom, such as outstanding checks. So another thing to point out, the 237 million represents all of our funds, not just general fund, but any balances in the grant funds, the debt fund, permanent improvement funds, and and such. So just kind of wanted to give
That's
you
good.
an
I've seen
update on
that.
that. And I think that concludes what I have.
And you took care of 1 and 3 for us.
For 1A and 3.
1A and 3.
So-
There you go. We got to do the next part of
I will
1.
do one.
Nothing personal, Kevin, but this is my favorite part because it's my favorite chart. Because I was here for years and there was no chart. Yes.
If we could- So good morning. This is a listing of all the state and federal grants that we have. And so the first section represents the public portion of the grants. So there are 21 grants, state and federal grants, that are available to us from a public standpoint, and they total $52 million. And so our goal for July is to see a 6% spend. And for this month, we actually did achieve that goal, so pretty excited about that. So we had a 7% average spend for the month of July. And I'll have some charts to show how that compares to previous years.
That'd be great.
And so the next page is the,
Go back to the Excel spreadsheet. And there you go.
it's towards the bottom. So the second gray section represents the ESSER spending. And so currently the ESSER, it'll carry over. So we don't receive an allocation for fiscal year 23, but what we haven't spent will carry over from fiscal year 22 into fiscal year 23. And so at this time, we've spent approximately, 98% actually of our fiscal year 22 budget. And then for the 4-year period from 21 through 24, we've spent 56. Doing a good job there.
Good.
And then the bottom section is the non-public grants. So we have a total of 6 non-public grants that total $15 million, and they are at a 5% spend. We go to the graphs. A state, please. And so this is what I was talking about insofar as July. So for the previous year, so the gray bar represents fiscal year 21, the green represents fiscal year 22, and then the blue represents 23. So previously in 21, we had a 2% average spend for the month of July. In 22, we had a 3% average spend for the month of July, and then currently the 7%, which we're pretty proud of.
That's great.
And
I think it's all because of the graphs.
we had a lot of increased
Not to mention your leadership, your skills. I couldn't resist.
but there was a lot of increased communication from the treasurer's office around the closing of the fiscal year and the opening of the fiscal year, which I think facilitated that increase in getting things encumbered in July.
Great.
Well, and they also meet on a regular basis with the big spender grant people and a programmatic side. And so they make sure that they're spending on the students of this year instead of carrying money into the future year.
Thank you.
And so then this is the ESSER chart. So the blue columns represent the budget. So the $325 million, that is over the course of 4 years. And then the $130 million, the smaller blue column, represents the budget for fiscal year 22. And then the green columns represents the actual spend for that time period as well. So the $181 million is being compared to the $325 million, and that's the total ESSER allocation, and that's what we've spent 56% of to date. All I
Questions?
have. Any questions?
Comments?
Just a couple of comments. I think this is really helpful to see that we are kind of staying on path, that we're meeting some of those goals, and I think especially though identifying the 7% goal that we met. So I mean, it shows that we are putting processes in place. I also appreciate the explanation you gave, which is that it was based on us communicating better with folks who are those people who demand a lot of our fund.
Spenders.
But that's true, that when we communicate better, we're able to do things more efficiently and get things done to meet the goals. And so I think that's a really good pay.
Ms. Borowski, you good?
I'm good. I was just curious to the treasurer's office, anybody can answer. As far as the reporting, how are they demanding the reporting come, and how is that going as far as the funds? Because obviously we're doing a good job, but
You mean the ESSER funds?
the ESSER funds, is that time intensive? Is that cumbersome, or how has it been?
No, it's after the fact. So when we report to the state,
Yeah.
our ESSER reporting. So yes,
Yeah.
we are required to report our spending to ESSER quarterly.
Quarterly.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're good. And since we first did the round robin introducing everybody, as soon as we had finished, we had a few people join us, so we want to make sure that they get introduced. We'll start over there against the wall.
Hey everyone, I'm Lauren Roberts and I'm the Chief Audit Executive for the district.
Hello, my name is Isaac Cohen and I am an intern audit staff with Lauren.
Okay, thank you. And of course,
Aranetta Wright, Superintendent of Schools.
appreciate the superintendent making time in this the very busiest time of year. So
I see she's drinking a Mountain Dew.
You will
Yeah, I
notice-
am. I have a drink of Mountain
you
Dew
will
in about
notice
6
that
years.
she's on the do. So gets up and starts dancing around. and did anybody else? We're good. You were here. You were here. We were all here. Okay,
Okay.
and I was here too. Okay, let's move it. Move
Okay,
on.
so then Mr. Porter is going to talk about the CRAs that will be submitted for the next board meeting.
Oh,
for
good.
approval.
Community reinvestment.
Agreement,
Act.
yes.
So we have 4 new CRAs that are rolling in for approval. 123 East McMicken, estimated 36,000 in total revenue over a 15-year period. Another McMillan property, 726, $181,000 estimated 12 years. Fourth and Pike, $2.4 million estimated over 15-year term. And we have Griffin Apartments at $1.2 million estimated over the term. And the total estimate for the total revenue over 15 to 12 years is $3.9 million.
Okay. Thank you. The board members have any questions about any of those? Do we have any idea what they kind of are? I mean,
Yes. So the first one is there's a partnership between Action Tank and OTR, the historic building downtown.
okay.
Another one, exterior, interior renovation, architectural update for a current structure. Another one, renovation of a 50-year multi-family residential building. And another one, renovation of the vacant historic building in OTR.
Great. Thank you. Any other issues? I know we're going to have another kind of CRA later that's regarding Silverton, the community of Silverton. So
Yes, Dan's coming back for that.
But
Yeah.
that needs a legal explanation, but that's good. And we hope some of those renovations allow families and children to be here, but we'll find that out. I think one of them does. You'll find that out. Yes, go ahead,
I think in
sir.
the descriptions, I do appreciate the fact that at least one of them includes affordable rental units,
Yes.
as well as the other one being multifamily. So it's a good sign that we're at least approving these things that are actually beneficial to the community, who normally would be our students, our families, who potentially could be folks that might be people we serve. So.
Yeah, I think the census, this past census was the first time in however many decades there was some growth population of at least the city of Cincinnati. And there was some growth too in the outlying areas that also are part of our district. So that's great. That's important. Are we getting what we deserve?
Yes.
Because that's going to be the CFT
right?
question.
Yes.
All right.
So you want to go ahead and do the Hamilton County clerk updates?
So tax incentive revenue for
Mhm.
Turk, as we all know it. We had a total for FY 22 of $22 million. I'm sorry, $22.8 million total. Bulk of that being Cincinnati, Ohio, was for $19 million. And for FY 22, we had a total comparing to last year, $20.3 million. So we roughly had an increase of 20% over last year as far as Turk money, which is we'd like to go up.
And explain Turk money to the.
So this is the TIF money, tax incentive financing. So it's abated, kind of like an abatement where the money, they pay their property taxes, but it goes into an improvement fund by the city. And they use that money to help with surrounding needs on the improvement projects, such as if they need a new driveway or a new street, curb or sewage or something, that money is supposed to be reinvested in those projects. But we still get our share. And so we have, how many of those different entities? 1, 2,
We do.
8 or 9 from different townships, and they all pay us directly.
Yeah, it's important the public knows that we have the city, but we also have a number of partial townships and villages and what have you. So
Right.
it's great. Right. Any other information?
Yes, I mean, the city had 57 project TIFs at the various stages in 2021. And we had $21.7 million in revenue for 2020. I'm sorry, yes, 2021. And total expenditures were $18 million.
All right.
Were there any projects that were behind or they were being considered for revocation at the Turk meeting?
I do not have that information right now.
Okay. Well, thank you for attending. You know, we've dealt with that as to who was going to attend, who would be representing. And
Right.
That's great.
So
Thank
Joseph's
you.
our representative.
Great.
So.
Mr. Morosky has
Yeah.
a question or a comment.
Thank you, Chair. To anybody, really, so this issue brings up, in my mind, harkens back to when we renegotiated our tax deal with the city. And thanks to what I think was a good job done by us and Holden Strong for the 100th time, we are getting something back. But in that agreement, and this just popped in my head as I was looking at it, unrelated to this meeting recently for some reason. And in that agreement, it stipulates it's 5 to 7 years, but it never really tells like up to 7 years. My point is,
You mean the length of the agreement?
the length of the agreement is up for renegotiation at the earliest, like, is it the year after next, 2024? Is question number 1.
I believe so, but I would defer to Dan.
I think
That's just going by fast.
it has gone by fast.
25
So
or something.
yeah, you want to start negotiating a year before it expires.
Right. So
25.
we probably should start thinking about that next year because, again, in the language, and then the other question, I don't know that really needs an answer. I think I know the answer. It just said it could extend to 7 years because I know the mayor wanted it at 10. We said 5, so we landed on 7. Anyway, but my point is, I guess we really should start thinking about it next year, calendar year, right? Does that seem
Absolutely.
put it on everyone's radar that,
Right.
and we have a council, they have to run for re-election next year, which is also bananas, because they just got elected. But they have to run for re-election, and I think it's a good issue to have them discuss and talk about as they're running for re-election. We've had a lot of great success in this district. People are excited about the new year, our new superintendent, the new transportation, et cetera. So I say strike while the iron is hot and see what their opinions are in the public arena.
It's a great suggestion and a great reminder as to when that comes up.
Yeah.
And perhaps Mr. Craig and Member Moffitt, who can put that issue on that list as to issues or items that the board and the district and the city have in common. Also in that renegotiations, we have now a brand new administration, both here, but also brand new administration in the city and new council. I do want to take the opportunity, though, this was a very difficult negotiations, and I will say that at the time, I think it was Vice Mayor Smitherman that kind of broke the log jam on that, and we're continuing to be very appreciative that he did that for us because we were going nowhere. Sides were not coming together. Very difficult. So we continue to appreciate his efforts on that. Good call. Anything else?
You ready to move on?
I'm ready if you
Okay.
are.
So the other PowerPoint, please. The next item on there, how to do business with CPS, we're deferring to September because the new COO just is on day 10 maybe of his employment, and so we just need a little bit more time to get behind that.
Yes, and this is an issue that I believe Member Moffett brought to our attention about just how easy or not easy it is to do business and where the information. So we we're happy to delay that as we move forward.
Yes, we'll produce the improved process. So,
Good point.
so the next item on there is a discussion of ESSER.
Yes.
And so go ahead, you can switch. So as we finish out fiscal year 22, as you saw from Taya's presentation, we've spent through a little bit more than half of our available ESSER grant. And as we were going through the general fund budget, we revised fiscal year 23-24 ESSER budgets. And so what we want to do is have a public presentation and have the board re-adopt those budgets. We were waiting for the results. There's still about $18 million that's outstanding in encumbrances. Is that right? And so as by the end of September, we have to file our final expenditure reports with all state and federal grants. And so as that refines itself, I wanted to try to get something on the schedule for what the Finance Committee would like to see in terms of that presentation and then in a public business meeting. So I just threw up some dates up there for consideration that are coming up, whatever dates are on the schedule already for public meetings.
I think first and foremost, as it pertains to ESSER, this is where the greatest amount of confusion and opportunity is. So I think as many times as we can talk about it publicly and as many times as the board can reassess and reevaluate, reconsider, I guess, the options being brought to us. I think that would be great. So I'm fine with whatever you want to do in that. I don't have a problem with two different finance committees or whatever dealing with it. And I do think the board will want to see it. And I would eliminate the cow because I think the cow has been committed to another topic. So if other people have other thoughts about that, Mr. Crichton?
I would just say, I kind of agree with bringing it before us, but I think maybe bringing stages of it before us or some version of that way so that it's not the same thing, 5 different times is probably the better way. So at least a less confusion. Because I think, to your point, what you're trying to give us is a clear information of where we're going as far as what we've allocated and the remaining parts that need to be allocated that we're going to submit.
So I wasn't suggesting that we present at all those meetings. That was like a laundry list of. My recommendation would be the October 3rd meeting because it gives us a chance to get back in front of the Finance Committee. It also gives the executive leadership team a chance to revise the budgets based on how much money is left available from the previous year. We may want to do a little different things. I know there's some line items in there that we're not doing right now. We may not want to do going forward. So it gives us a few weeks to get that solid and then come back.
We go with the recommendation from the treasurer.
I like that.
Go for it.
Perfect. Okay, so next slide. I was asked to kind of share the town hall dates and then the topics as I think Chairman Bolton had some ideas about some new topics that we wanted to add to the list. I know there was a little bit of concern about over engaging on, I don't know how to say it. The first topic, over influencing finances when it comes to the election.
And I might be speaking out of turn on this, but I'll see what my colleagues think. It's unimaginable. Unimaginable. But I would never, ever. For the public, you know me for a long time, and you know that's not true. At any rate, I am very concerned, and we're allowed to say this about our needed election day opportunity, which is to renew our levy that has been passed and then also renewed, I think, twice again. I don't want us to necessarily be talking too much more financial stuff that is required to explain the renewal. That's where the public's mind is going to be. And I think the more we can talk about the reality as how we spend that money, you all have been gracious in giving before. So as we do a lot of the stuff that we want to the community know about, the more that can be delayed till later, I think is more important than, I think that's important, and more important is to get the message about the levy out. Madam Superintendent?
And I would concur, because the one thing that I'll share, and I've been, because I can talk about the levy all the time. I think I'm the only one that can all the time. And so as I've been meeting with just a lot of individuals, just all across the community, there is still very much confusion around ESSER funds.
Yes.
And I think the more we talk about the fact, and once you have the conversation, they're clear. It makes sense at that point. But I don't think that people really still understand that is not recurring money. It's one-time money. We have no idea if we're going to get it again, and what the impact would be if we don't have the levy passed. So I would agree that even as early as that September 8th date, really doing that around elevating ESSER, what we do. I know that we did it. We've done it quite a bit. We've done it every time that we stand. But because of those individual sit-down conversations that I'm having, that is a question that continues to come up. So I definitely think that that's what we do.
And I think it's great too that it's paralleling the levy presentation. It's interfacing with the levy conversation, because that is the point. That, and it's 10-year at this time instead of 5-year. I think that the later, more specific, more varied financial information and engagement can wait until later, because we've got enough of a big message between the ESSER and also requesting from a very generous tax base the renewal.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I met with Jens earlier this week, and so we pulled together some of the prior information that I put together with enrollment information with the superintendent's address ABCs to put together the levy materials. I was hoping to get an early draft today, but I wasn't able to do that before this meeting, so we'll share that when we can. But focusing on this is the direction the district is going, and not about the A's and B's of finance.
Just the ABCs.
Yeah. I am CPS.
That's right.
We are.
We are
CPS. We are. Yes. Yes.
I do think,
Yes,
one
sir.
of the things with putting these ideas together is that if we put together this general framework of what the district does with the funds that we receive to explain how this levy is necessary, right, to have that conversation, then I do think that can also provide us a framework for those future conversations that keeps it more into, even when you're talking about those individual parts, how does an individual part play into the bigger picture? Because I think that's the other part, and to the superintendent's point, folks look at ESSER funds and look at it as a whole separate thing, as opposed to this is something funding things that specifically is a part of what the district does, right? It's not separate that we always get this extra money that comes in every so often type deal. It's that we pick projects in line with what the district does. And we have to continue on some of these things beyond it, but that's the reality of the conversations, because I think that's the other part is we get too far into the weeds of each of the different little areas, even after we pass the levy. Folks aren't going to hear that correctly.
No.
Right. Well, and every opportunity I have a chance to speak out loud is we did not get a $300 million check. That's sitting in the bank account.
Correct.
We have to spend the money first and then wait for reimbursement.
Right.
And so that can become a cash flow problem. We're fortunate that we've been good stewards and we have a healthy cash flow, but some of the smaller districts really struggle with spending money because they don't have the cash flow to cover. And so that's just.
Well, it's not even just the cash that they have it or they don't have it. It's harder for smaller districts to even do that kind of management.
Right.
So I think you're to be applauded regarding being able to, and your whole team, the whole department, think about that. I mean, that managing that kind of cash flow. It's not just about the money itself, but it's that kind of management that
We have a
other
small but
districts don't
mighty
have.
grant scheme.
Well,
yeah.
there you go, with great graphs. Mr. Morosky.
Two quick cues, questions. Question number one, have we gotten any questions specifically, I guess Jen or superintendent or anybody, about our entrance into that, this is going into the lawsuit about vouchers? Do we ever get questions about that?
I haven't gotten
I
any.
haven't either.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess my next question is, I'm suggesting you do this, but I mean, maybe this is for us. I know I get questions about it out in the community, and people, it's like 100% positive. People I'm messing around with, though, probably buy a little more and pick a trade.
I see it on social media.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But my point is also with levy and going to 10 years, I found that that's been a helpful. I'm not saying that we need to get into that from the district level, but why is it 10 years? Well, it's 10 years because of this reason, but also just so you know, if you don't want to keep getting hit up by us, you need to vote for Repeal and Columbus, et cetera, and the actions we're taking, which has gone over positive.
That's right.
And I don't know if that needs to be a district-focused thing, but just wanted to bring it up.
Well, you have an option to make them continuing.
Well, and I know we do.
I keep trying.
I know, I got your back. 10 years is good for now. That's been a big seat change.
That's been the
Since I've been here.
compromise. Yes,
I
got
10
the
years
evil-
was
I got
big
the
enough.
evil eye over there.
Yes, in Greater Hamilton County, telling people they might not get to decide or be able to hold us accountable, that's a hard message for folks here.
With regard to the kind of our discussion, I know we're not going to get really into the full discussion of the levy in this, but
Right.
is there also this expectation that there would be communication out for the board to be able to communicate in addition to the financial town halls? Whatever information you're pulling out there that we can kind of have like a.
That's what Jens and I are working on, like the elevator speech PowerPoint,
Yes.
so that for members and those who are participating in the what we're calling the speakers bureau, so principals who go to the community council meetings, superintendent who's asked to come and speak at the Chamber of Commerce, we're all speaking the same message. So yes, we're working on that. We still don't have an issue number. We are at the top of the list. I looked it up on Hamilton County Board of Elections. We are first on the list, but we don't have our issue number yet. They said by the end of August.
Yes, and I would, back to the superintendent's position too, the justification for the levy, the history of the levy, how we spend it, how it's part of the big picture. But I would also almost have a separate sheet that does explain ESSER, as visually pleasing as possible to figure the whole cash flow piece, the amount, because I do remember, and Jen, you may remember this too, back in the very early part of the Obama administration, we received a great deal of money. It was sunsetted, but it was about reform. It was about changing things and whatever. And that did complicate, as I recall, some of the discussion, even when this one that we're getting ready to renew was first passed. Because that was still, even though it was early in his administration, well, you're just getting, it looks like you're going to get a whole bunch of money from President Obama. So, I mean, people are more aware of the national message than they are of anything local.
Right.
That's what they're talking about. So I think we can, that would be useful.
Okay. Got it. Okay, so next slide. State funding. So
Yep.
House Bill 110 was passed. That was a new biennium budget. That was the first year was last year. From prior to this new funding formula, our state share was at 47%. And what that means is because we have local board control, we also have a burden from our local taxpayers to help fund K-12 education. And based on the property, it's a 3-part index that compares property wealth, income wealth, and median income, and comes up with this crazy index. But because of our property wealth and our income, we are considering one of the wealthier districts. So that way the state only has to fund us for 47 cents on the dollar. The new formula, in conjunction with the recent economic experience and the triennial update, has now dropped us down to 40%. So last year we were at 43% state share, and now we're at 40% state share because our 3-year average on property valuation went up 11%, and so did our income, a 3-year average on income tax or earned income. So we became wealthier, indexed to the 40th district. I don't know why they picked the 40th, but that's why the formula looks. And so we are getting now 40 cents on the dollar from the state. Over that 2-year period, it's cost us over $2 million in revenues. So our state funds are shrinking based on the enrollment that we have, which is putting a greater burden on our taxpayers to continue funding and with rising costs. I just wanted to publicly share that phenomena. The urban treasurers are planning to attend the OSBA Capital Conference to start communicating urban needs with the next biennial budget. And remember, they're only phasing in the budget as it goes. So the first year we lost $60 million in revenues because of the phase-in. And so we want them to phase it in faster and to change the property wealth or the state share calculations.
Here's a question. When they're doing this calculation, is there any thought process in the reality that urban districts have a different set of obligations on them?
So
We're just on the enemy list. Separate the other 600
yes,
districts.
there is some consideration. So in the formula, there's categorical funding, and that's based on the number of students who are students with disabilities, gifted, English language learners, economically disadvantaged. So there is funding weighting that goes with that. The fair funding, what hurts us is they came up with formulas on how to staff what a student needs to be educated. Our staffing formulas are more robust than the state's. And they also fund those staffing on this statewide average salary and benefits. And our salaries tend to be a little bit higher than state average. So that means that our decision making is that our local funds will help make up those differences. The difficulty is when you compare Cleveland to Ohio, our student populations are very similar, but they have, last time I looked, about 73% funding from the state while we were at 46. And so that's difficult to deal with.
And just to continue that, the Cleveland piece is not just because of the difference in the formula, but to the public, that district was taken over. And so it does not have an elected board. It's appointed by basically the state and the mayor and whoever else. So it's a kind of an interesting, but they do some great things. They've got a great superintendent, but the comparison is always bad. And the comparison, frankly, to Columbus is hard because even as much as we are a metropolitan kind of district, Columbus is even more so. So when we start looking at the needs in a particular district, it is apples and oranges, but it really is apples and oranges when you compare the urbans and to the other 600, or probably it's about 580 school districts that aren't even considered anything urban.
Right.
And we live in the midst. We think we live in the midst of suburban districts, but really, as a county, at least the way we are now looking at what's urban and what isn't, we have more surrounding urban districts than Columbus or Cleveland do. So it's kind of it's an interesting phenomenon. So keep that up. And the enrollment piece, just real quickly, because I know. President Lindy occasionally will say, well, if actually maybe we don't want to grow because it costs us too much money. So, which I always like to say, no, we're going to grow. And we are growing. Just explain the enrollment piece that does cost us. We don't necessarily get the amount of additional money we need for enrollment piece.
Well, we only get 40 cents on the dollar for every new child we get. So that makes a difference.
Yeah.
So the base rate is 7,000, whatever 40% of 7,000, I can't do the math in my head anymore, is what we would get from the state. So our local share has to make up the difference.
Right. Yes.
So I'll also add to that, and I think it opens up for a greater conversation. But that means that we're even further impacted when we enroll students that don't live in our tax base.
Mhm.
They don't live in our school, our district's attendance area, because we're getting no taxes, no revenue for them
We do now. The
We
open
do now.
enrollment students are included in our educated ADM.
at 40% though,
Yes,
at the 40%.
Yes.
So we still are then still
Exactly.
responsible
Right.
for making up the difference.
right.
For that 40%. So, I mean, it may be fine in terms of just thinking collectively, but
Right.
that's just something else
I
to
know
think
Mr.
about.
Morosky would love to have that conversation with you.
I wasn't going to say anything. I appreciate you
But I
bringing
will
that
tell
up.
you as chair, we're not going to do that now.
We can do it in policy if you'd like to come to policy committee next time.
I don't know if that's a plus or a minus. I don't know what I just walked into.
No, it's, you're
I've been
absolutely
talking
right.
about this.
Even though they eliminated pass-through funding, we still require to for students.
Correct.
So we're still.
Well, that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
I mean, the drain on our district really, and what have you, coming out of Columbus, so much of it is about the vouchers and the charter piece. And the fact that those kids per pupil get more money than our kids do.
Yep.
But we'll move on.
So I think that was my last slide. Is there something else? No, yeah, it was my last
I
slide.
think that's you, and that would then take us down to, we're not going to be doing more review of levy presentation. That takes us down to the transportation in Silverton. Shall we just try to do Silverton fast, if that's okay, Madam Superintendent?
There was a question about the city agreement, abatement agreement.
Yes, when do we have to
We
start
start renegotiating.
renegotiating the CRA?
It's a 5-year agreement. It was a 5-year agreement that was effective on January 1, 2020. So
So FY '25 it would be, and so before we get to FY '25, we need to negotiate.
that's right.
Can
I am so impressed with you that you said that.
I answer back?
I am on it with you. That is
We're
great.
vibing. Yeah. Good.
And he says he doesn't like finance
I never said
committee.
that. I never said that. I said my brain doesn't necessarily work this way, and it's been a
But
good
look,
exercise for me.
maybe these 6 months
Yeah.
have really kind of
Look,
brought you to.
yeah, my wife is the one you want on this committee.
I can testify to that.
Well,
I think I might
probably
have-
the one you want on the board. Anyway. So in that agreement, it's got that language 527. So does that mean at 5 years we could? I'm just going to say for the record, I don't want to do this. Take this. Is that language in there? It's awkward, kind of. It says 5 to 7 years.
I'll have to research that. I don't recall that. I recall it being a 5-year agreement, but I'll research it.
Yeah, because Cranley wanted the 10. We wanted 5, and I remember Councilman Sittenfeld was kind of advocating as the consummate peacemaker,
No
so to
comment.
speak, of for 7. And
I
we-
will research
yes.
that and
Okay, cool.
respond.
Yeah,
Thanks.
maybe not September, but maybe October. Could we find out more about that? Just that piece, or it can just even be a memo, I think, to the full board.
That's fine, yeah.
That'd be great. Excellent. Silverton.
Silverton. We were approached earlier this summer by both the new village manager for Silverton. His name is Mike Lemon, and a developer that they are working with to develop a project within Silverton about the community reinvestment area, CRA. Again, Silverton is outside of the Cincinnati city limits, so they're not covered by the agreement that we talked about. It's 100% CRA, which is common, but we, in our agreement with the city, all developers who get a CRA are required to make a pilot payment in lieu of taxes to the district of 33% of what the taxes otherwise would be. That's intended to recover the sort of fixed rate levies that property tax owners pay in Cincinnati. We shared that with the developer and Silverton. They were both agreeable to those terms. And so we're recommending that at the September meeting, the board accept this CRA agreement. I asked for a couple of lines about the project itself. It's the Ravine Apartments. It's being converted. It was redevelopment of an old multifamily complex that was run down and deteriorated. The team is taking it to the studs and bringing the complex to a 26-unit, one bed, one bath residential unit, residential complex. So our position on these, just to conclude, is generally ambivalence, provided the school district, not ambivalence, we support what the municipalities believe to be good development projects for their communities, provided the school district is made whole for its share of taxes. And I think that's true here, and would recommend approving this CRA. Glad to answer any questions.
Questions, gentlemen? I wish there were a couple of like 2-bedroom units in there, but happy that Silverton is doing things that's economically wise for them, and giving us the rightful amount of money. On Silverton, I think I asked the question when this was first coming up. I wanted to make sure that we're doing for Silverton whatever it is we've ever done for Cheviot or Amberley Village or Gulf Manor or any of the townships. I know it was the Delhi and Green have come in with CRAs in years past. And is it the same thing that we are doing for the city of Cincinnati?
It's always been our position to treat all those municipalities consistently, and to treat proposals that they make consistently with what we do with the city and those other communities.
That's great. Then we're saying cool to put it through on the board when that works for you all. Okay.
We'll move it forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, issues on anything we've talked about thus far before we go to our thing? And Dan, thanks for coming back.
You're welcome.
Before we go to our transportation update with our superintendent. We good? All right.
Okay.
Madam Superintendent.
All right. So
tell us the news.
All right. So we're up and rolling. I think that's one of the things I can say. Let me start with
rolling.
Right. So I think I'll start with Metro first. And as I shared with the board, we work very, very closely with Metro. And as of this morning, at this point, we have not received any concerns or complaints from Metro. We did not receive any yesterday. We did verify with Metro and ask them whether or not they received any, just in case there may have been some going to their call center and not to ours. And as of last night, we had not. And as of today, at about 10:30 was the last time I checked, we had not received any. So that's a plus, on that side. Not to say they won't come, but that's where we are right now. So we'll continue to monitor that. Mm-hmm. On the yellow bus side, and I also shared probably about 3 weeks ago that my concern, and I think I shared that publicly, that I was a little more concerned about our yellow buses than I was about Metro, honestly. And where we are right now, we have, as of yesterday, so earlier this week, we identified that there were students that were routed to buses. So they had a bus route, but working with our contractors, there was not a bus identified for them. And then that was primarily 7th and 8th grade students. Sure. I will be bringing some more information back to the board, as I've shared with you already. Just very honestly speaking, there was some information that was shared with me earlier, I guess last month, that really was not the case. And so as we dug in, I think Treasurer Ragnar referenced our new COO a few moments ago, who is probably on day 10 or 11. But as we really begin to dig in and get really, really deep in the weeds, we identified quite a bit of things that need to be addressed. And that's just to be completely honest with you. So what our team really worked hard to make sure that we rerouted students, but it caused us to stack students in terms of buses. I was able to honestly make a couple of calls to our contractors directly. We met with them directly. And so they have identified additional buses for us, which means that more than likely I will be coming back to ask for additional funding in terms of the contract, to be just transparent. But they're doing that. They're in the process of getting those buses to us. So that means that once that happens, we'll be able to update routes again, so that we don't have students that their bus pickup time is showing them getting to school late. So if you look in Power School, there are some students, everybody has a bus, They have a bus designated time to pick them up, but some of those students, their bus stops are the time that they're picking them up. It's going to get them to school 15 or 20 minutes late just because of when they're being picked up.
Right.
And to err on the side of getting the students to school, our thought process is we would rather get them to school, even if they're late, versus not getting them to school at all. So that's where we are right now. So we're continuing to work through that. As soon as that happens, we've communicated with families. We communicated with families yesterday when we realized that there were some buses that just didn't come through. We communicated with them early yesterday. We communicated again last night to ask them to check Power School again when those routes were updated with those new times. The buses didn't change much, but the times did for some students. And we're continuing to do it. We have about 10 folks that are working from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. in our call center, addressing calls, answering calls. I'm responding to emails. And so I would just would like for everyone to just recognize that we're on top of it in terms of knowing what the issues are. Now it's working through what those issues are, and being able to provide the updates to the board.
Good. Questions, comments? Mr. Craig?
Again, I appreciate you providing this information to us, and again, working hard. The team's working really hard. First day of school is always difficult, and especially difficult when you make changes to system, so that folks aren't always as aware of things. And so I think, to your point, we are identifying those concerns and then addressing them and trying to get them in the best position possible. And just for the clarity's sake for the general public of the no people watching. 10 people might watch later.
Right. We have about 10 people.
Oh, okay, 10 people watching.
Wrong links, they're all present.
Okay, gotcha.
There's
Man,
always
this is
a
so
good
disappointing
handful
here.
of fun.
No. Those watching, just if they're still experiencing problems or if they're still experiencing questions, just the process that they should undertake to get those questions answered or raise those issues to your attention. What steps they should take?
Yes. So the first thing they should do is call 363-RIDE, 513-363-7433. I've called several times during the day. So, for example, when I called today, there were 9 people ahead of me. What we are working on with the team is trying to address the issue as they're on the phone with the person. Mm-hmm. So what I would just say to everyone is we do have to exercise some patience as we're doing that, because as they're having conversation, it's not necessarily a quick conversation. So that would be the one. The second, they can also email us directly. There is a transportation email box. I've had people that have reached out to me directly as well. There is an FAQ as well on the website. So we would also encourage them. We've made it where it's easy to find on the website. You go to transportation, the FAQ is there. We actually placed it there before we did our town hall. The transportation town hall is also there. And so watching that is also beneficial because that information is still very, very accurate. And so those would be the 3 steps that I would recommend. And someone will respond. And so it's really important. And the last thing I would say is if we're not getting a response, then that's definitely send an email directly to me. Because we want to make sure, this is very sensitive for families. It's frustrating for families. And as a parent, I understand that. So we want to make sure that we work through to resolve.
I think, and again, I think the fact that we have all those different methods in which people can is showing that both we care and showing how much work we're putting into getting things done.
And to, I share some of this with Board Member Morosky, but I am pretty active on social media. And so as a result of that can be a plus and it can be a plus. So that I've had people to reach out to me directly on social media. And I'm saying now I'm not always on social media, but, a lot of times I'm walking about, I can respond to a question, or if they email me, we can get it to the right person. But we want to make sure that the issues are addressed and resolved. And so we definitely want them to reach out. If they contact us, we'll get them a response.
Mike?
I just want to give a vote of confidence for the way things are going. I know it can be frustrating. We see like the yellow bus performance hasn't been what we want. Again, I've only been here 5 years. And being in school is always going to be strange. This, believe it or not, feels smoother just based on what I'm hearing. The fact that I'm serious. The fact that Metro is going as well as it is, and Metro didn't even really exist too much last year, and then the year. So it's my vote of confidence, and people are getting responded to, which at the very least is different and better than what I've been telling my friends out in the community leading up to yesterday. I'm like, how's transportation going to be? How's transportation going to be? I tell them all, I said, I'm not going to promise you it's going to be perfect, but I will promise you it will be less sucky than it's ever been. And everyone's like, good enough. And I go, but then after like 2 weeks or so, 2-3 weeks, whatever, we'll be there. But I can promise you the first day is not going to be as bad. And I've only gotten 2 emails.
Yeah.
So.
And I can promise you that next year, it will not be what it's been this year. I can guarantee
All right,
you
well,
that.
I'll tell 'em.
Because
I love it.
and my response has been hashtag hold me to it.
Love it.
Because next year, because now we know really what those kinks are, and we can start working through those processes right now. So that next year, this time, we look at autopsy data, of course, but we do that so that not only are we're reflective, we're able to plan moving forward.
Yeah.
So I am not. There are two organizations that have been shared collectively with me that are part of our organization, have been a challenge for a long time. Transportation was one of those. That doesn't make me feel good as the new CEO of the school district. So I'm not okay with it's at least as good as it was last year. Families deserve better than that.
It's a little better though.
I've heard that it's a little better,
it's less sucky.
but it's not. It doesn't meet my standard of excellence.
Good.
I guess I should
No,
say that.
I love it.
Definitely.
Great. I love it.
So.
I have a few, not surprisingly, but I think it is better than last year. Anything would have been better than last year. So that's not a good standard.
I know.
That doesn't help. We were in a state of crisis as a change in Metro delivered to us so late. So I am expecting Metro to be significantly better. Would like to hear reports, not just from Metro, but I want to hear reports from the high schools, particularly, and I'm really interested if Metro can start to generate for us distinct writers and ridership, which has been something that's been difficult for them to put together for us. I'm interested to see, at least I only know this anecdotally, and that's no way to make a judgment, but my extended family, two of the kids' buses did not show up, but that was probably better than last year. And the other piece on the Metro, I'm interested positively. People are liking the fact that their 7th and 8th graders aren't getting on Metro.
Mm-hmm.
I've at least heard that. Now, these are the same kids that are probably want extra curricular passes eventually, just because of the nature of those kids. But I've heard that that's better, and I'm interested to find out from the high schools the 7th and 8th grades coming in on or being dismissed to go to Yellow Bus versus the Metro piece, and sort of that crowding that occurs at the dismissal. But I was happy to hear you call on the television yesterday, I believe it was. I thought your messaging was good on we're going to work through this and whatever, and people knew they were going to work through it. But I was glad to hear you call them contractors instead of partners. Mm-hmm. That cannot color our relationship with people. We have many, many partners that really are partners. Then you have vendors, and then you have contractors. And so the expectation, people get that. Well, if you're partnering with them, you must think they're wonderful. Well, no, that we're paying them to do a particular job. I appreciate that. The distinct ridership and what's happening at the high schools is of interest to me, and also this call center piece. I can again forgive the history, but on a snow day, a rough day when there was a great blizzard, and it was the first 6 months I was here. Superintendent Blackwell was in her office when I was leaving my office, trying to find a way to get up Hamilton Hill and down Ludlow. She was in her office, and as I saw the light, and she said, Madam Superintendent, what are you doing? And this is going to be a compliment to you as well. And she said, well, I don't leave until the last kid is at home. And now leaving, that was then physically you don't leave, but the idea that you're that accessible, I think that's important. And I think it's important too that call center have those extended hours. And we may have to keep that for a little bit longer time. But last thing, on the Yellow Bus, do we have an idea how short we are of buses and short we are of drivers?
So right now, in terms of drivers, as of yesterday, there were 3 contractors that shared their drivers didn't show up that morning. We did not know that information the day before. In terms of the number of buses that we need, honestly, probably about 30. And so we have identified 20 of those already by working with our contractors, but it's taking them time to get them to us because they're routing them from other places. And so it should be within the next couple of weeks that we actually get them. We will have to rerun metrics for what that cost is going to be completely honest.
Sure.
I thought about something, it rung in my ears actually, and I reached out to the treasurer the other day. And, this is my partner, so we talk about things pretty often. And so something that rung in my ears, you said in one of our meetings, one of our very first meetings, when we talked about transportation and the information that we were being given that time. You remember? The information that we were being given that time about the savings, you said not a chance. And so you said it, you said not a chance. And I have to agree with you. But our goal is to also get as close to that information as possible by doing some other things that we now know that we can do. Essentially, we expanded the inclusion of 7th and 8th grade students on the buses, but we did not increase the number of buses because the study that we did said that we could reroute the way that students were running without increasing the number of buses. And the reality is, when you look at where some of those routes were shifted as a part of that, those routes were shifted in a way that uses a different map than what we use. So therefore, you have students that are then crossing busy highways or busy intersections. So our team has had to take much of that information and rework it and still rework it, as families are saying, my bus stop is now in this spot, 3 blocks away when it was here. And we have to be able to address that. So if I were to give 2 things that I see that were the major issues with the projections that we were given, that would be what it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. And I said that was the last, but I'm just, again, concerned that our students experiencing homelessness, whether or not they're getting to via van or what have you, watching all of that. And also the special needs kids that we do have that require different transportation to the public. There are kids that arrive at Cincinnati Public in ambulance. So just so everybody understands this. So,
and the plus, honestly, for everybody outside of the 7th and 8th grade population in certain schools, because it wasn't everyone, but outside of that, our special needs population that gets specialized transportation, most of them are on vans, and so we didn't have concerns about them yesterday. We had 1 or 2 that might have a 3rd grader, for example, that their stop was moved a couple blocks away, but nothing outside of the norm for the first day of school in terms of sharing that information. And then, we were able to work through that. So our major concern yesterday was the 7th and 8th grade, and we're working through it. And I think we'll have a resolution sooner than later. Today is much better than it was yesterday.
Yeah, and we know next year will be better, but
it will be.
I'm anticipating next week will be better.
It will
I'm
be.
anticipating September and
Absolutely.
October will be better, knowing your style of management, knowing what everybody's committed to this as best we can. So I think that's helpful.
And this is the last thing that I'll say on this, but I do want to publicly thank the team because this has been a challenge. There is the same population of people that are working that are covering that 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. shift. So it's not like we have new individuals that can come in and cover that time, and they are committed to really getting it done. And they know the expectation, but they're really working through it. So I would also just want to say publicly, if we can also extend them some grace,
Absolutely.
As they're working through it, because they've been working over and beyond. Once we identified what the challenge was, they really have been. So I just publicly want to say, as their leader, that I do appreciate them.
I think we'd all agree that the interim effort by that team throughout last year as a result of what happened, because there was a change in employment and whatever, as to who was employed and what was going on. So I think that's great. And I know in finance we look forward because we just spent 18 consecutive months having transportation be on the agenda. And we really don't want that. We'd like to move to easy things like facilities. But at any rate, we appreciate the work that's been done. And I think the more specific you can get to telling people about the buses that whatever. I think you've been doing a good job messaging, but I'm more than willing occasionally to throw some people under the bus. But certainly none of our employees. So it's great. Anybody else have any new business, other business, administration or board? Because we're at that time. We have a great team and a great effort, and appreciate all the work that the staff and our leadership does. That's it. No hearing, no other business. We are adjourned. Yeah,